because it's obvious things I don't need to go into.
Thank you, Woes. Appreciate it. Yeah, last year the issue was that I hadn't updated my Skype client, and because of that, I wasn't receiving messages. I mean, I just never used Skype, so it turned out that way.
Yeah,
glad to be here now.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I should say, I mean, no doubt some of my viewers will already be familiar with your channel. I remember when I discovered it. I think it's possible that the video by which I discovered your channel was the humorous one you made. I'll just say the words, "Hello, are you a good person?" And then it went on that very amusing exchange between well, what would you describe a sort of Antifa type or a progressive lefty student sort of type and a normal person, and it was a very funny exchange that I think you'd done very quickly, but it worked well.
Thank you.
But most of your videos are not like that. It's you speaking about some philosophical quandary or other. So if that's what the viewer is into, I would recommend you take a look at his channel. But so you briefly explain or describe yourself and your channel to people.
Well, yes. So the video you mentioned is not my sort of typical video that I'll make, although I treat my channel as just sort of a personal project where I'm talking about things that I'm interested in, doing creative things that come to mind. I basically will run with any idea that I get. And sometimes that leads to me making humorous videos like that. Sometimes it leads to me I've made like song covers that I changed the words to have it relate to the whole political issues that we're dealing with today. And my main focus, though, really is philosophy, the history of philosophy, and especially the history of the philosophy of the ruling class. And that's my main interest lately, has been tracking the history of what the ruling class thinks and what they think they're doing, the direction they want to take society in, and sort of just sussing that out. Because what I've found is that if you look into any major event from the past, maybe since the Industrial Revolution, and even before that, but I would say for sure since the Industrial Revolution, if you look at any major turning point or key decision that was made, you can find that there's a continuity in not only the philosophy, but even the families that are involved. And it's intergenerational, and it's well organized in sort of these secretive occult societies. And they, in a way, they're very open about what their plans are. And I started to really think about this. So when I first went to university, I started at Loyola, which is a Jesuit university here in Chicago. And I was in their honors program. And my major was chemistry. So really, when I went into college, I was thinking more about science. That was my interest growing up in high school. I was on like the chemistry team in high school and stuff like that. So that's where I made my entry into college. But the honors program at Loyola, at least at the time that I was there, forced you to take a history of philosophy class. And it was extremely rigorous, and it was probably the most difficult course I've ever taken. And they take you in 2 semesters from Plato up through Aquinas, up through more medieval philosophers, Renaissance philosophers, up into John Locke, Hobbes, into the present, with political philosophers like Nozick and Chomsky and things like that. And they draw this continuity going all the way back to Plato. And when I really started thinking about what these philosophers were talking about, it always involves universalism and the state providing more and more for benefits and security and just the state expanding more and more to control more and more things. And now we're at the point where it has come to fruition in a lot of ways, where a lot of modern governments have this sort of socialistic, we need to take care of everyone mindset. And at the time, I was kind of a libertarian, so I didn't like this history that I was being taught. And so I
So
started to
hold on a sec. Hold on a second. Just can I just clarify?
yeah,
Are
yeah.
you saying that the history of philosophy is the history of ever increasing justification and rationalization for socialism, for an overbearing state?
In a way, yes. I mean, you go back to Plato, and Plato explicitly talks about how his philosophy is to have his quote republic, where a group of philosopher kings who are separate from the masses controls everything that happens to the masses from behind the scenes, down to even like who you marry. I don't know if you know this, but like Plato advocated that marriages would be arranged, but that the people would be sold a lie that it was done by lottery to keep them happy, so they didn't think that they were just having their marriages arranged. But secretly, the lottery would be rigged by the philosopher kings. And so I started thinking, like, is this really the kind of philosophy they want us to learn? I mean, it's all about like occult rulers behind the scenes who are better than everyone, who want to make the world a utopian, much better place. And it could be tracked all the way up to, I would say, one of the most crucial figures of the 20th century was Julian Huxley, who was 100% in line with this. Julian Huxley was the brother of Aldous Huxley, and Julian was the first director of UNESCO. And UNESCO, he wrote a paper called UNESCO's Purpose and Its Philosophy. And I have some quotes from that I can read if you want.
Yeah, do it.
This is from the conclusion of UNESCO, its purpose and its philosophy. The task before UNESCO is to help the emergence of a single world culture with its own philosophy and background of ideas and with its own broad purpose. This is opportune, since this is the first time in history that the scaffolding and mechanisms for world unification have become available, and also for the first time that man has had the means of laying down a worldwide foundation for the minimum physical welfare of the entire human species. And it is necessary for the moment that two opposing philosophies of life confront each other from the West and the East. So he's talking about the individualism of American capitalism and the collectivism of Soviet communism, and that these two opposites meeting and conflicting will end up being resolved in a higher synthesis that results in a world government with one culture. And they kind of explicitly talk about this kind of stuff. And I mean, it's incredible how open they are, and the whole synthesis. We can get into this later, but this idea of synthesis, antithesis, goes back to Hegel. And I have a book here. Oh no, not this one. No, not that one. Here we go. Hegel and the Hermetic tradition. So Hegel, who clearly has influenced these, he was a big influence on Karl Marx. Karl Marx, the major socialist. Everyone learns Karl Marx is like a mainstay in philosophy classrooms these days.
Tell me about it. You go into a bookshop and there's an entire section on feminism or critical theory. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I went into a bookshop last summer, and I mean, I've been in bookshops since then, but in this particular bookshop last summer,
Right.
there was a section for multiculturalism, a section for feminism, which was like three, sections, and then another one for critical theory, and another one for something else that I've forgotten now. But I mean, all of this stems from Marx.
Right.
And it's just amazing that, and there's no right-wing equivalent. It's just like, okay, this is general philosophy here.
Yeah.
But there are special sections for all these left-wing ones.
Yeah, and someone like Karl Marx is taught as general philosophy. I took like a 101 class a few semesters ago, what is freedom? And this Karl Marx, like the first few weeks of class, we learned about ancient philosophy, but then as soon as we get to modernism and like the modern political philosophy, Karl Marx is the main guy, and then everyone after is just commenting on Marx or making critiques or little alterations of what Marx said. And Marx came from Hegel, and Hegel was deeply influenced by a very ancient tradition of an occultic, Kabbalistic type of tradition that basically their main idea is that they have the intelligence. And I could read another quote from Julian Huxley that sort of illustrates this. Julian Huxley, in his book, New Bottles for New Wine, which, by the way, just think of that title for a second. New bottles for new wine. Who are the new bottles? And what is the new wine that is being put into them? Right? This is what he's talking about. Quote, this cosmic self-awareness. This is in just the first chapter of the book, which is titled Transhumanism. And he sees this, the progression of mankind as coming to some cosmic awareness, which he says, this cosmic awareness is being realized in one tiny fragment of the universe, in a few of us human beings. The new understanding of the universe has defined man's responsibility and destiny to be an agent for the rest of the world in the job of realizing its inherent possibilities or potentialities as full as possible. And if it is as if man had suddenly been appointed managing director of the business of evolution. Human life as we know it in history, basically human life as we know it, the sort of life that we value, which is the traditional tribe, going all the way back to a tribal based understanding of family, blood, nation, soil. This is the human life as we know it in history that he's talking about. He calls it a wretched makeshift, rooted in ignorance, and that it could be transcended by a state of existence based on the illumination of knowledge and comprehension. Okay, so what these people think is that they're better than everyone else, they're smarter than everyone else, and they're chosen. This is where the religion comes in. They're chosen by God to direct and shepherd mankind to something better because we're just all ignorant. And they have, and this talks about it in this book too, what they want is that they believe that once they obtain encyclopedic knowledge, then they will be able to bring the hand of God into reality and make a heaven on earth almost. It's really a messianic eschatological worldview that they are so megalomaniacal that they think that through their knowledge, through their gnosis and their understanding and this encyclopedic knowledge that they think they can obtain, that they will bring God into existence in the world and bring his kingdom of, into existence. And it goes back a long time. I mean, Huxley was part of a family that goes back to the 1700s, early 1800s. They were involved with the Darwins. The Darwins themselves were involved with the Wedgwoods and the Galtons and all these other big names in eugenics and whatnot. And they were part of something called the Lunar Society of Birmingham, right? So I'm just taking you back in history, like how you could follow these things. The Lunar Society of Birmingham is, in mainstream history, it's called the architects of the Industrial Revolution. And like these people were a small group of highly intellectual, extremely wealthy, tons of resources, and they consciously made the Industrial Revolution was not an accident. This is something that was consciously done by design by a small group of people that were extremely dedicated. And so you could trace Huxley back that far, but then you can also trace the influence of these sorts of ideas back even to like, just to give a few names of, because before the Lunar Society, you could go to like the Rosicrucians. Okay, the Rosicrucians were a big group of these mystical, Kabbalistic, occult people who, to name a few names, Robert Flood. He was the son of Thomas Flood, who was Queen Elizabeth's treasurer of war. Robert Flood was a major alchemist, Rosicrucian. John Dee, Queen Elizabeth's right-hand man, basically his
Yeah, he was her sort of soothsayer, and advisor, and
right.
so on.
And he's
No,
portrayed as,
definitely an alchemist.
right, and he's portrayed as just kind of a magician, kind of just goof. Sometimes people connect him to covert operations, intelligence gathering, things like that. But he was, this kind of philosophy comes through in these sorts of people, like Edward Kelly too. He was an advisor to Emperor Rudolph II. Michael Meyer, same. Francis Bacon was big into Rosicrucianism. Elias Ashmole, Heinrich Kunrath, Paracelsus. You can look all these names up and see that these were extremely influential advisors, basically behind the thrones, that were advising this kind of philosophy, this kind of we see ourselves as being better. We need to shape the world and make it into God's image through this kind of encyclopedic knowledge and this scientific handling of religious development. I guess it's amazing to trace this kind of history, because the more you look into it, the more you see that this is being fulfilled today. And one of the things about why they want to take out the white race, why they want to disrupt and send migrants into our homelands and erase our pride in history, our pride in our forebears, our pride in our own culture, is because we stand in the way of this. If we are, I think we are one of the last groups in the world that would absolutely oppose this if it was generally known that this was the plan, you know? So, my whole point in bringing all this up too is we need to start looking at ways of removing our dependency on the system that they have created, and not going about conventional routes for trying to make political change through the democratic system, which they're really, the democratic system is sort of an illusion that they're using, where
Oh
they
yes, I
control.
mean, yeah, everyone's familiar with this concept. I mean, it's just another way for the elite or the powers that be to get their way, but through a pretense of a charade.
Right, because if you really believe that we're living in a democratic society, then your mindset is that the government has your consent, or at least it has the public's consent in general. And how can you fully rebel against something where you think that the majority of people in your society are actually in favor of it? It's a great trick if you're able to control mass opinion. And this is the other thing, was education. How do they control mass opinion? They control it through education. If your children have gone to public schools, they've been indoctrinated into this. Going back to UNESCO, Marie Theresa Moret, I've made a video on this. Marie Theresa Moret was an educational philosopher, I guess you can call her. And she was commissioned by UNESCO to write this paper called "Do Techniques for Peace Education Exist?" And within the first 2 paragraphs of that paper, she says, we need to devise a system of education which instills the mindset into children that they are not members of a nation, that they are not defined by their nationalities, but that they are members of the human race, of the human species. And she was involved with like Adolphe Fiere and Elizabeth Rotten, who were the ones who came up with the International Bureau of Education, which was connected with the International School of Geneva. It seems a lot of this stuff comes out of Geneva for some reason, which was itself coming out of like the League of Nations and the International Labor Office, which also was in Geneva, Switzerland. And these 2 people, Elizabeth Rotten in particular, was directly connected with people like Beatrice Enzor, who was a top bigwig in the Theosophical Society. And the Theosophical Society, just think of that word, theosophical, knowledge of God.
What did you say this woman's name was?
There's Beatrice Enzor, who was a close
In the,
associate.
in the Theosophical Society, what was her name?
Beatrice Enzor. That's the
Right. Okay. Right.
She's
I
connected
don't
with
know that one.
Elizabeth Rotten and Marie Therese Moret. And so the Theosophical Society, that knowledge of God, goes right into this Kabbalistic mindset of we're going to obtain what God, we're going to understand what God wants and bring it into the world. And the Theosophical Society can be seen as sort of a continuation of Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry, which was the older version, because these things morph and change. I mean, a lot of people want to say something like, oh, it's the Freemasons, or oh, it's whatever, insert the Illuminati, or insert whatever word there, but it's basically a
See, that's something I was going to ask you. Is there a thread of people like dynasties, for example, creating these organizations throughout history, or is it a set of ideas that gets seized upon by people here and then another few centuries later, and there's sort of no connection between this organization in the 17th century and this one in the 19th century, kind of thing?
There is certainly, if it's not family dynasties, which a lot of the times it is. I mean, like I said, with the Huxleys, they have a family dynasty that goes back to the 1700s, and they've been working on this project for that long. But it does sort of, if I were to say one thing, it would be like the Jesuit orders, who brought it up from antiquity till the modern time in the way that it exists today. The Jesuits had a lot to do with that, because you look at all these alchemists throughout history, and they were studying with the Jesuits, or they were brought up by the Jesuits, or all these sorts of things. And it shifts and changes based on the need of the moment. It's not like Freemasonry was big in the 1900s, like the early 1900s, late 1800s. And Freemasonry was really big with like royalty, especially like English royalty and stuff like that. If you look up Freemasonry in Georgian gardens, a lot of these like nice English country homes have these sculpted architectural gardens that were designed according to specifications of like Freemasonic occult symbolism and stuff like that. There is a thread that you could trace, and that's my point. I mean, you can't say it's like one family in particular, but it's a certain mindset that has been propagating itself, I would say, through what the Jesuits say, which is if you have a child till the age of 9, you'll have them for life. It's Right. And what's not well known though about it is that they have these techniques that basically are foolproof. If you really do instruct and indoctrinate a child in the right way, you have them for life. And so they don't necessarily need a single bloodline, although there might be. I mean, I haven't gotten that far. It does seem like this can be traced extremely far back, but it's something that has propagated itself through a sort of caste of many interconnected families. It's weird, because if you look up even American presidents, if you look up American celebrities in Hollywood and stuff like that, a lot of them are interrelated in weird ways. I mean, it's amazing how it does seem like the more you pick each individual out, you see that there's strings attached to them to all the others. It seems like nothing is accidental. And it seems like nobody who has a lot of notoriety, somebody who's promoted heavily by the media, almost 100% of the time, if you really look, you see there's invisible strings connecting them to everyone else. And it's like, wow. So that is one of my main focuses, is trying to pick all these things out, looking at each of these key crucial moments. Like another example would be the Great Reform that was going on in Britain at the turn of the 19th century. You know about like Peterloo Massacre and Cato Street Conspiracy, things like that. Have you heard of these events?
Oh yes.
So
I mean,
I've been doing.
I have, but the audience might not have. But I don't know if you want to describe them or go into it at all.
Well, I wouldn't be able to really do it justice. I mean, the fact
Well,
of the
I
matter is,
studied the Peterloo Massacre at, oh, when was that? Was that high school? I think it was high school. But effectively, that was the rich. All I can remember of it now is that it was a rebellion of peasants that was quelled by wealthy people. I can't even remember if it was aristocracy or if it was industrialists. Can't recall now.
well,
But it lots of massacre in it, lots of death.
right, and it was, well, it maybe the word peasant isn't right because most of them were urban workers, and
So that just goes to show how how long ago that it was that I learned about this.
no, you got the basics. You got the basics down though, and it was during a moment when the Industrial Revolution had basically just taken place over the last 100 or so years, and it was finally getting to the point where all these people have been brought from the countryside into the cities to work in these factories, and a lot of the old skilled craftsmen as well were becoming obsolete because of automation, and what you find though when you look at these events is that the Peterloo Massacre, I'll just name a couple more. The Peterloo Massacre, the Pentrick Rising, the Spa Fields riots, the Cato Street Conspiracy. You see that these are all connected to people like Major John Cartwright, who is upheld as some great reformer in mainstream history. But Major John Cartwright, his brother was a big-time industrialist, and he was meeting in these Hampton clubs and also the corresponding clubs that they had with people like Joseph Priestley and Josiah Wedgwood and who's that big time, I can't remember at the moment, but the point is that he came up with the panopticon idea.
Oh God,
Bentham.
Jeremy Bentham.
Jeremy Bentham, right? He's connected with these corresponding societies and whatnot, and he's considered a great reformer. And not only that, but like Burdett was supposed to be a speaker at one of these big rallies that turned into a riot. And Burdett was married to the daughter of one of the oldest banks in Scotland. Can't remember that name at the moment either. When I tell these kinds of stories, it's hard to keep all the names straight. I wish I had like a presentation to show or something, but it seems like when you look, even like with the French Revolution, these reform movements that were occurring were not really grassroots. In a way, they were molding and containing and influencing genuine grassroots sentiment. But from the top, these big military, industrial, merchant kind of people with lots of wealth and lots of money were steering these movements in such a way as to be advantageous for themselves. It has never been, we never really have shifted from what used to be, which is open control by a small group of oligarchs. It used to be the peasants and the slave classes and stuff were openly controlled by people that openly ruled them. And now they're just sort of hidden. I don't think that they ever really went away. I think that they just changed strategies, and they contained and they steered these movements to be advantageous for themselves. I don't think there's ever been a genuine overthrow of these oligarchic rulers. It's just never. There's just a change in strategy.
Okay, well, the obvious question is, what if they're right and they are better than everyone else? I mean, do you believe in? And I'm not saying that they are or whatever. I'm just putting the question to you because it's obviously needs to be asked. Do you believe in elitism? Do you believe in hierarchy? Are there some people who are better than others?
I believe
Yeah.
in honesty first and foremost, and they are not honest. They're deceitful about what they're doing, and not only that, but they have ruined what I would consider to be a natural and harmonious existence that our people had lived for thousands of years. And they continued to even try to live that past the Industrial Revolution. People think like the Industrial Revolution happened and then all of a sudden everyone's living in cities, or everyone chose to go to the cities or things like that. But through a lot of different mechanisms, they forced people into the cities, and they forced people out of their traditional rural lifestyles. And they, through deceit, through manipulation, through control over resources and stuff like that, they have taken over, and they're destroying whatever chance we have at living any kind of natural existence. Basically, the vast majority of people that exist today can only exist within the system. There's a
So
very,
almost like humanity has almost been redesigned by these people.
yes, to the point where the vast majority of people who exist today, especially, I mean, a great example of that would be like in Africa, where kids, uh, the average birth rate is like 7 or 8. You know, that is a clear example of an existence that could not happen without these multinational corporations sending in aid and stuff like that. But it's the case in general, and uh, they're gonna come to the we'll get to the point where um, our resources will dry up and the growth cannot continue, and we're polluting. More and more species are dying, the forests are shrinking, the oceans are becoming more and more polluted, and it's just, people are becoming more and more degenerated, and it's like, you know, what if they're right? I mean, it's like, how could that be right?
Well, okay, of course there are problems in the world. I'm just wondering to what extent they can be attributed to the vision of these people.
Well,
Because obviously, I mean, I would say that hierarchy is a real thing. Some people are better in the sense of being more capable or more insightful or more intelligent than others. I would also say that most people are natural followers. I think that's, I mean, that's an I think that most people do want to be led because they can't be bothered or they aren't able to understand large, complex issues. So that I think there is a need for an elite to take care of everything else, to shape society. The question is obviously, is it a good elite or is it a bad elite? And is it a secret elite or is it an open public elite? Because, you know, for reasons of dignity and calm, people want to know the situation. But even that's debatable. And to what extent do people actually want to know the truth? And to what extent do they just want to know what to do to handle, you know, being alive? You know, I'm very skeptical of this idea that I'm skeptical of the degree to which the ordinary normal person needs freedom, liberty, um, and to what extent they need the truth, actually. And it's not because I hate them or have contempt for them. I just look around and I see people who are not engaged, who just repeat what they hear on TV or whatever. And, you know, at first, for a few years, that made me angry. And then I realized, well, okay, this is probably just how people are. And yeah, I've just got to accept it, you know?
it is how people have become. It's not something that's natural to humanity. I mean, I made a video recently where I compared uh, Aristotle's conception of the state to Thomas Hobbes's conception of the state, and I included this video of a lecture that was given where this professor was talking about this and comparing the two. And the main idea is that Aristotle conceived of man as an animal with the additional capacity for political life. And what that means to me is that when Aristotle was alive, the average man was capable of surviving on their own without this social dependence and this political safety net, and that politics was done to unlock a potential. It was done to improve something on top of the base of being able to survive literally as an animal. Thomas Hobbes, by the time Hobbes existed, he conceived of the state as being this thing that would protect everybody because life is so brutish, nasty, and short, and that nobody can survive without this dependence on the state. And that shows to me not some kind of universal truth or some fact about human nature. It shows a progression of social engineering that had occurred. And
can I just mention one thing that you reminded me of there? The word idiot derives in the first place from the Greek word idiotes, meaning private person, ignorant person, someone who's not interested in politics. I don't know if it was a pejorative. I don't know if it was an insult or if it was something that they expected of most people. Maybe they expected most of them to be idiotes. I'm not sure.
I read about that the other day because I was interested in that etymology too. And what I found, I could be wrong, but what I read was that this connotation of being stupid did not actually, it wasn't a connotation back in the day. It was literally just private person, like some old person who's retired and done with politics or something like that. They're an idiot. But
it says here private person, layman, or ignorant person. So stupid doesn't necessarily come into that.
Okay. Well, so my whole point though is that I think of it like, imagine all of a sudden you had access to an exoskeleton that gave you super strength and allowed you to jump 20 feet in the air and punch through walls and, lift up cars and stuff like that. And wearing that exoskeleton would be kind of cool because you'd be able to do a lot of stuff that you don't usually do. But if you live in that exoskeleton for so long that your limbs decay and you can't walk on your own anymore, then you're fucked. I mean, it's not helpful anymore. It's just a crutch. It's no longer an addition. It is your dependence. And
well, okay, but two things. That assumes that at some point you are going to be without the suit.
Well, the suit would. I mean, why would you rely on this piece of technology?
It's giving you such power.
So, but the whole idea is that it's able. I mean, you don't want to become dependent on something that can possibly break down in that way.
Well, that's the matter. That's the issue, isn't it? Are we going to be without this thing? In which case, we have been weakened by this thing, and now we're very vulnerable indeed.
Right.
But I take that point. I don't know why I said that really, but I guess it's just to sort of bring in another angle to it. I mean,
yeah.
The question with any vulnerability is it actually going to come up? Because if it isn't, then it's kind of irrelevant, unless you're talking in addition to the physical dependence is going to become a sort of spiritual degradation because you are simply reliant. I mean, it's like the welfare. You live on welfare for years and years. You can continue to live in it for years and years. The money is never going to stop coming in, but in the meantime, you've been psychologically degraded, and that is lasting damage. So yeah, there we go.
And that ties into, like, I made a video about Thomas Jefferson's notes on the state of Virginia. And Thomas Jefferson at this point is the only founding father of America that I still really have admiration for. And he talks about how what he wants for the Union at that point in time, what he wanted was something like Virginia, which was populated, vast majority of its population were yeoman farmers who owned their own land, created their own food, sustained themselves on their own, but they were involved with communities. They were involved with craftsmen and things like that. It's not like living out in the woods on your own, but it's a matter of not being dependent on, for example, what he really didn't want was foreign industry coming in and setting up giant factories and having trade become what they depended on for the economy and things like that. He wanted people to be living in this yeoman farmer, natural, harmonious existence that for the vast majority of our existence as a race, we have lived. And this type of thing is where these values come from that we appreciate. We appreciate things like the differences between men and women. We appreciate things like nature and strength and honesty and social cohesion with your neighbors, things of that nature. I think that these sorts of values, and especially something like the differences between the genders and things like that, can only come about in the type of environment from which they came, from which they spawned. And these all these values, traditional values, came from living in a traditional lifestyle. And that once people became mere cogs in a machine where all that mattered was you being able to do the job that the industrialists tell you to do, then suddenly the differences between men and women aren't all that important anymore. You know, a woman can be a textile factory worker just as much as a man. And especially when like the state is the one raising the children in schools. And it's just the situation that we're living in is not conducive to the types of values that we want to uphold. And my solution to that is, instead of running for political office, instead of trying to spread some kind of informational campaign or something like that, which is not going to work, we need to be starting to live a self-sustaining lifestyle, removing our dependence, moving into communities with each other, and living the way that our ancestors lived as closely as possible. I'm not like anti-technology either. I just my whole ideal would be have solar panels where you don't have to rely on the power company down the street, you know, or have water filtration systems where you don't have to rely on the municipal water. Have raise your own crops, raise and breed your own animals. These sorts of things, I think, are what would actually lead to a resurgence in the values that we appreciate. And it's not easy for people to hear, because a lot of people want to continue to live the comfortable lifestyle that they have created. And you know, if that's the kind
of they don't want to leave the exoskeleton,
right, even though it's
yeah.
coming, because it's built on incessant growth. And that's why, like, they want to bring one of the reasons why, I mean, we know the fundamental reason, but another reason why they want all these migrants to come in, and the reason that they promote population growth so much, is that they need incessant growth. Like, capitalism is built on incessant growth, and it's just unsustainable. We will come to a point where we've bled the planet dry and the resources just aren't going to be there anymore, and there's going to be a massive downsizing. And when that downsizing happens, when the catastrophe hits or some kind of instability occurs in the system, lots and lots of people are going to die. And that's something that I think at this point is unavoidable. And the longer we wait, the worse it's going to be.
Black Pigeon is in the chat. Black Pigeon speaks, and he just pointed out that when you were talking about living a sort of agrarian lifestyle, he said the Amish do this. This is great advice. You didn't mention the Amish. I mean, yeah. So go ahead.
I go, I pick up my raw milk down at an Amish grocery shop here in the city. It's the only place you can get raw milk in Chicago, is the Amish grocery. And by the way, don't drink pasteurized milk. That stuff is poison. Get raw milk.
Well, I favor Gold Top milk, which is, I don't know if that is pasteurized, actually.
Probably is.
I'm not sure. Yeah, you might be right. It might be there. Yeah. So I don't. Hold on.
I'm getting lag over here.
Oh, okay. So that I saw clean room. Oh, that's for now.
Now it's better.
I'll switch my. Oh, okay, okay. Somebody pointed out the super chat. Somebody pointed out Aristotle would clean his room for a live stream, but I don't know if he's referring to you or to me. Maybe both.
I cleaned a little bit.
It does look very comfy.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, and someone's pointed out that raw milk is literally illegal in Canada.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And you can see, I mean, this is another thing. It's like, you look at like the food pyramid, and like the diets that are promoted by like the UN on an international level. These diets are promoted that in the long run make you weak and make you sick, and it's really bad. Like, start looking into things like raw meat, look into things like raw milk, eat as many eggs as you can, go and get duck eggs and eat as many duck eggs as you can, drink them raw. That's what I do.
Somebody's just said Mussolini drank something like 2 gallons of milk a day. LMAO.
It was probably raw.
Somebody asks, why is pasteurized milk poison?
Because, well, the combination process of there's a video on YouTube, if you look it up, this farmer talks about this, where the combination of pasteurization and homogenization basically breaks the milk down to such a point where it's really no longer even milk. It's like a milk product by the end, where all of the chains of fat molecules and cholesterol molecules and all the enzymes and the living material in the milk that is actually good for you and helps your body to digest it and helps the nutrients to be absorbed, all of that gets destroyed in the pasteurization process, where they boil the fuck out of it. And then homogenization is where they pressurize it through these tiny little holes to break all of these molecules down to the point where, like, what used to be good cholesterol for your body that could be absorbed and used is now what they would consider like bad cholesterol, and it's no longer even good for you. And like the vitamin D, the vitamin A, the all the sort of little nutrients and the fat, the good fat that your body needs, because your brain is like 90% fat. I think that's an exaggeration, but your nerve cells and stuff are covered by fat. Your body needs fat, and it needs this good fat. And so when they pasteurize and homogenize milk, they add back a little bit of fat to it. It's just no longer even milk. It's really a milk product. So poison.
This is your chemistry education coming in useful. Right.
Poison might have been a bit of an overstatement, but in the long run, it's just not good for you.
There was another question. Oh yeah, and this is sort of going off into the nutrition stuff rather than the philosophy. But okay, here we go. What do you think about the low-fat diet deception?
It's a deception. Yeah, I mean, your body needs fat. It's and especially it needs animal fat, animal products. I'm not talking about like go eat a Snickers bar or anything like that, but you need to be eating like animal organs. You need to be eating stuff like eggs, which has so much good cholesterol and omega-3 fatty acids and all this stuff that your body really needs. Try to eat as little processed food as you can, because that's, I mean, think about like the Hindu religion where they made the lower castes vegetarians. That should tell you something. Like, they forced the lower castes to be vegetarians to keep them weak, to keep them docile.
God. And I wouldn't even ask you about veganism.
Oh man,
it's amazing how people get really passionate about this stuff.
Yeah, go vegan and die. That's Spheeridge's motto, I guess. And Spheeridge is a crazy guy, but he still does good videos on veganism. All
right. Is there anything else you'd like to say about what we were talking about before, the more weighty topic?
Well,
I don't know if you'd finished that story, because you're talking about kind of chronology there.
Right. I mean, we could talk about things like, look up H.G. Wells' The Open Conspiracy. He talks about this openly. Bertrand Russell, The Impact of Science on Society. You know, these sorts of things have been talked about openly. And the fact of the matter, I mean, and also big thing, look up the Princeton oligarchy study. Princeton did a study, like a meta-analysis study, which was incredibly insightful. Like, I'll just read you the last couple lines of the abstract. And so this is like a mainstream source that you can send to your friends or whatever to convince them that democracy is a lie. So it says, multivariate analysis indicates that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on U.S. government policy, while average citizens and mass-based interest groups have little or no independent influence. The results provide substantial support for theories of economic elite domination and for theories of biased pluralism, but not for theories of majoritarian electoral democracy or majoritarian pluralism. So this is a mainstream. This was published in 2014 in the American Political Science Association's magazine or foundation or whatever it is. And it's based on empirical data. I mean, this is, you cannot, they compared policy decisions to mass opinion and then policy decisions to little business foundations and what business elites want. And it shows. I mean, you can look, there's no piece of evidence that would suggest that democracy is true. And, you know, it goes, the Freemasons see themselves as having a tradition that goes back to Egypt. The Rosicrucians talk about this too. And even if you look back into ancient Greek history, it seems like this sort of play between the local polis and the international cosmopolitan empires that were springing up in the Middle East have I mean, the same sort of dynamic was happening where the ancient Greeks had their local polises for a long time. That's what actually developed and created the Hellenistic culture. And then after Alexander, you see cosmopolitan influence from the Near East, from the Levant, from places that we you know, call Israel today, and coming over, influencing the Greeks, bringing in this cosmopolitan mindset, which was based on Plato's philosophy of a universal God and one world order controlled by philosopher kings behind the scenes who are just smarter than everyone and more worthy of rule than everyone. This is an old ancient sort of mindset, and we're living in the days when I think they have finally succeeded in many ways. Just like Huxley said, you know, they finally have the scaffolding and mechanisms required to bring this about. And yeah, it's disturbing.
Yeah, well, it's a huge topic. I hardly know what to say about it, although I am getting tired, so forgive me. It's not that I'm not interested. It's see, I always wonder about this kind of thing because whenever you hear somebody saying about talking about this kind of thing, I always wonder, well, what's the alternative? And obviously, sorry.
I already offered my solution, my alternative.
I know, as homesteading. Yeah, I know. But then what about a group that just decides to fuck you up? You know, I mean, are you a sort of anarchist? I mean, do you believe in having a state?
I believe in having tribal states. I believe going back to tribalism. And of course, I mean, hierarchy, authority, these things, nobody can deny these things. I mean, if you ever worked in like a group project or anything like that, you know that there's no real decision by committee ever. There's always the one person who's deciding really and making decisions for the group. And that will never go away. But what I want is a lifestyle that is more close to my ancestors, and that even ties into paganism because I consider myself a pagan, and I believe that our religion, our natural native spirit can only really reemerge if we are living under conditions that our ancestors were living in. I mean, we cannot live in a city, in an urban life, working for a corporation, involved in this Judeo-mystic tradition, basically this Judeo-mystic environment that has been brought about by these elites, and expect to be genuine pagans. It's just I can't see that. So basically, there's no alternative. It's like, yeah, you know, that was a good point you brought up. Like, what if they come and just wreck you? Because that there have been examples of groups that have been totally wrecked by the U.S. government, especially. I mean, like that people know what I'm talking about. But my whole point is to stay on the down low. My plan really would be to try to fly beneath the radar, and once the collapse happens, I don't think they'll be concerned about us because I think the collapse will be engineered to bring everybody into the cities, and to really finally clamp down totally on control. And if you are one of the people who cannot survive on their own, then once the collapse does happen, or once any sort of instability happens in your country, you are going to be one of the people who will flock to the government camps or the government centers in the city that provide for you. You're going to be one of those people that will be fully under their thumb, and I don't want to be one of those people. And
okay.
one other thing I'll say is I plan on having children soon, as soon as I can. And I don't want those children to be brought up in an environment where they can have any influence whatsoever on them. I don't want to send them to their schools. I don't want them to watch their television. I don't want them to work for their big corporations. I want nothing like that for my children. And I will do my best to provide a life for them that gives them opportunities apart from that.
Okay. There were several questions. Oh, yes. Okay. How much were you influenced by Mr. Mr. Louis Cachet? I don't know who that is.
Is that a relation to Marie Cachet, Varg's wife? I don't know who he is.
Yeah, I don't know. Louis Cachet. I suppose I should Google it. Hold on a second. I'll Google this just to make sure. Maybe this is a troll. And somebody has asked twice. This is just to bring down the tone. Somebody has asked twice, is there a corpse in your bed?
Is there a corpse in there?
Yeah, someone seems to think that there's a dead body in your bed. I don't know. Robert, I think the answer is no.
I don't know what that means. That sounds like some kind of inside joke or something. I don't know.
No, I think the guy literally thinks there's a corpse in your bed.
Like behind me?
Yeah.
This is a couch.
Oh, it's a couch. It's a couch, and there's a sort of hump thing there. Right, okay. Disaster averted. Robert, don't worry, my guest is not harboring a dead body during a live stream.
Oh, wow.
Right. Sorry, sometimes you get these rather surreal questions. And there was another question that was more serious, but I can't remember which one it was now. Oh, somebody said that you look like your average guy from the 19th century.
Oh,
that's quite
thank
interesting. You. And I think that's all of them. But I'm sure there was a good question that it's not a super chat, but I spotted it. That's so annoying. Okay, let me see the. All right. Okay, yeah, that's it. Okay, I can't find this question that I spotted earlier. I apologize. I've forgotten what it was. But we're both starting to flake out, I think, so might be best to let this one go for now. All right. So oh, sorry, I've not I had the thing focused on you there. So okay, are there any final questions for Apollonian Germ? Because this I see it was about a project that's it doesn't matter now. Okay.
Well, while we see if any other questions come in, can I just say one thing, Woes?
Yes, certainly.
Don't take this the wrong way. I say this out of racial love, brotherly love. Try to get in shape, man. Try to quit smoking so much. Try to quit the coke. Try to just make yourself. And you could present a joyful image. You could present an image of strength, an image that will inspire, an image that gets people going and doesn't give people down, make people depressed or make people dreadful. Try to do that, man. You could do it. I believe in you. Get in shape. Do some push-ups every day. Stop drinking Coke. Clean your room. You could do it, man.
All right. Yes, I'll do what I can. I can. All right. Somebody asks, do you know about the Free State Project?
Yeah. When I was a libertarian, I used to really appreciate that idea, and I wanted to go live there, but that's not exactly my dream anymore. I mean, I've tried to learn some lessons from what they're doing, which is congregate, gain local power, and do what you're doing within your community, and just screw the rest. But
was that the Libertarian Project about 10 years ago?
yeah, it's New Hampshire. They wanted everyone to move
Right.
to New Hampshire.
Right. Okay. I think I heard that they got like 20,000 people?
Yeah,
It was quite a large number, actually.
I
as
think that was
recall.
accurate.
Right. Okay. All right. So I don't think there are any other questions. I think everyone's a bit burnt out at the end of the night. But it is. I mean, I'm not dismissing anything that you've said, because it is one of these things where we don't know. I mean, and even the basis for it. Do we need an elite? Is it okay for the elite to lie? To what extent, in what circumstances, is it okay for the elite to lie to the people? And that, I mean, I know that obviously some people would say, no, it isn't at all in no circumstances, but I think that's probably unrealistic. But then there is, apart from that, there is the simple question of, well, can we trust an elite to have people's best interests at heart, or are they going to get drunk on everything? And what you're describing is an elite who, well, are cosmically megalomaniacal.
Absolutely.
And
I mean, think about you know, what they call themselves in a lot of ways, the chosen people. You know, the chosen people by God. It's people talk about these things. They say, you know, this is the group that's doing it, but they don't often talk about like what the religious motivation is. There's a deep religious motivation, and it has to do with basically collaborating with God on his project to make the world a perfect place where, you know, they rule.
this is the thing. Yeah, this is a thing. I've actually seen people of the group we're discussing saying that this is something some of them really despair about regarding their group. You know, that there are so many people in that group who have utopian goals, ideas about just remaking the world. Actually, like really extreme. Well, yeah. Massive ambitions, and it's something that brings a lot of hatred towards them.
Right. I'll read one other quote before we end by Julian Huxley. He says, "The human species can, if it wishes, transcend itself." This is this is going back to another point of like, are they right? They're going against nature. They think that they're better than nature. They think they're higher than nature. They think that basically nature is what is a lot of the esoteric symbolism they use is like light being contained within brute matter and stuff like that, and like we need to break the light out of brute matter, and it's anti-nature. It's completely mentally ill in a lot of ways. So that's,
yeah, I can see the sort of well, the overall thing is that they're perverting something. They're perverting nature, making us sort of forcing us into unnatural ways of living, unnatural environments, and well, unnatural
social
habits
arrangements
and morals and social arrangements as well. Yeah, so I can see what you're sort of twisting something out of recognition, out of its natural cycles, its natural habits, and so on, and its needs and desires even.
It's
So yeah, sorry.
Anti-instinct.
Yes, yes, and of course, a lot of, in fact, so much of left-wing thought is why you should suppress natural instincts. You know, it's like very clever, very, very long-winded justifications for living in a. I mean, for God's sake, I saw this this story about 2 years ago now. Some Swedish woman had been raped by a Somalian migrant, and the Swedish judge had refused to deport this guy back to Somalia. And his rationale was, well, we've got the infrastructure here to deal with it when this guy rapes a woman. But if we send him back to Somalia, then he'll rape Somalian women, and they don't have the infrastructure. So why is a Swedish woman's welfare more important to us than a Somalian woman's welfare? And you know, this is a guy who's been totally divorced from the idea that he should have any special attachment to his people.
Yep.
And
That's what
it's, yeah, exactly. And it's really, when you see it like that, it's disturbing. But then an even more disturbing example is the German father, whose daughter was raped and murdered. And then I think she was actually raped after she was murdered as well by some fucking, God knows what, some refugee. And, and the father responded to this by setting up a charity for refugees. I mean, you just couldn't make it up. I mean, how unnatural, how bizarre and perverse is that behavior?
Yeah, that's about as bizarre and perverse as you can get.
Yeah, it's really extreme. I mean, you've got to wonder how divorced has he become? Has he been made from his instincts? Because that cannot. I mean, no father. I mean, no, I just can't see it.
I can't conceive of
Maybe, yeah, maybe it's his way of sort of overcoming the sense of impotence that he's got, that he couldn't save his daughter. So he overcomes that by, forgiving the guy who did it. But I don't know. That's the only rationale I can see, and even then, it's a stupid rationale. All right, so I think we can certainly agree that we are living in a strange time, and there are all sorts of wacko things going on.
And don't assume it's accidental. That's my whole point. Don't assume if you see that a house is built, if you see that a system is designed, someone designed it. It's if there's a certain pattern that we're heading in, and you could see that this pattern has occurred for the last 200 years, it's not accidental. Don't assume that history is accidental, or that it's like part of some kind of cosmic metaphysical inevitability. That's not how reality works. So that would be my main message to take away from this: is look into history. Don't assume that the direction we're heading in is accidental. Don't assume that society is run willy-nilly just by whoever. It's run by an elite that actually is extremely good at what they're doing, and they've done it for hundreds of years. And yeah, it's not accidental. And someone like Richard Spencer, by the way, and NPI are either useful idiots or actual controlled opposition. So avoid people like Richard Spencer.
Well, I'm not going to endorse that message.
I know you would.
That's your opinion.
That's
That
my
I'm not.
opinion, and
All
I
right.
knew you wouldn't endorse it.
No. All right. Well, thank you, Apollonia and Germ. Let's leave it at that. And
Thank you, Mr. Woes.
okay. All right. And that's it for this night. Tomorrow I'll be back for the last night of live broadcasts. And after that, it's going to be a night of pre-recorded millennials. So, and that will be it. That'll be it over. So anyway, I'm sorry that there were 2 cancellations tonight. I did what I could. Time zone stuff is very confusing for most people, including me. But in this case, it was. I have to say, I'd done things correctly. It was the 2 guests who misunderstood. So it's unfortunate. There's Germ advertising the books again. So there we are. Okay, let's leave it at that. So Germ, thank you for appearing on Millennial 2018.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, hold on a second. There's a super chat. We have the recipe for tacos. The slaughter of our children is not a trade-off. All right. Okay, excellent. Let's leave it there. So thank you for appearing, and thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.